G'day, mates. Let's talk about a war. Not just any war, mind you, but a war that pitted man against emu. Yes, you read that right, emu. Those big, flightless birds with a gaze that could curdle milk. This, my friends, is the story of the Great Emu War of 1932. Picture this. Western Australia, the sun's beating down, the flies are relentless, and the world's in the grip of the Great Depression. Times are tough all over, but for the farmers out west, they're about to get a whole lot tougher, thanks to an enemy that travels in their thousands, eats like there's no tomorrow, and seems to laugh in the face of danger. Now, Australia in the 1930s was a country already well acquainted with hardship. Drought was a regular visitor, and the global economic downturn had hit the nation's farmers hard. Wool and wheat prices had plummeted, leaving many struggling to make ends meet. But as if things weren't tough enough, nature decided to throw in another curveball, a plague of epic proportions. And this plague wore feathers. You see, emus are nomadic birds. They roam the vast Australian outback, following the rain in search of food and water. But with the changing climate, their usual patterns were disrupted, leading them to wander into places they hadn't been seen in large numbers before, like the wheat fields of Western Australia. These weren't just a few stray birds, mind you. We're talking about an estimated 20,000 emus, all with a hankering for wheat and a knack for wreaking havoc. They descended upon the farmers' fields like a feathered tsunami, gobbling up crops, trampling fences, and generally making themselves a nuisance. The farmers, already grappling with the economic crisis, were desperate. Their livelihoods, their very survival, depended on those crops, and here were these feathered fiends making off with their hard-earned harvest. Something had to be done. So they turned to the one group of people they thought might be able to help: the Australian Army. Section 4, and then came the Lewis guns. Now, you might think it's a bit much to call in the army to deal with a bunch of birds, but these weren't just any birds. These were emus. Big, tough, surprisingly fast birds that seemed to take a perverse delight in outwitting their human adversaries. The army arrived armed with Lewis machine guns, ready to engage in what history would come to know as the Great Emu War. The plan was simple: mow down the emus and put an end to the avian anarchy. What could possibly go wrong? Section 5. Tactical Retreat, a Lesson in Humility. In the annals of military history, there are few campaigns as peculiar and humbling as the Great Emu War of 1932. What began as a straightforward mission to control the emu population in Western Australia quickly spiraled into an unexpected debacle. Well, as it turned out, quite a lot could go wrong. The soldiers, armed with machine guns and a sense of duty, found themselves outmatched by the sheer tenacity and agility of their feathered foes. The emus, far from being easy targets, proved to be formidable opponents. The emus, you see, had a secret weapon: their uncanny ability to absorb bullets like feathered bulletproof vests. These large, flightless birds could run at speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour, making them incredibly difficult to hit. Their erratic movements and surprising resilience turned the battlefield into a chaotic scene. Okay, maybe not literally, but they were surprisingly difficult to bring down. The soldiers' frustration grew with each failed attempt, as the emus seemed to mock their efforts with every swift evasion. It was as if the birds had an innate understanding of guerrilla tactics. They scattered at the first sound of gunfire, making them difficult targets. The emus' ability to disperse and regroup quickly left the soldiers bewildered and exhausted. Each encounter ended with the birds escaping unscathed, leaving the men to regroup and rethink their strategy. The soldiers, meanwhile, struggled to keep up with the birds' erratic movements. Their outdated equipment and lack of experience in dealing with such agile adversaries only compounded their difficulties. The emus seemed to be always one step ahead, turning the operation into a test of endurance and patience. Newspaper reports from the time are full of accounts of emus seemingly outsmarting their would-be executioners, running circles around them, and generally making the army look rather silly. The press had a field day with the story, highlighting the absurdity of the situation and the unexpected prowess of the emus. It was a comedy of errors, a farce of the highest order, and the emus were the undisputed stars of the show. The Great Emu War serves as a reminder that sometimes even the best laid plans can be undone by the most unexpected of adversaries. In the end, the emus emerged victorious, leaving behind a legacy of humility and a story that continues to amuse and bewilder to this day. Section 6, a new strategy. If you can't beat 'em, fence 'em out. The Great Emu War of 1932 had been a bizarre chapter in Australian history. What started as a government-sanctioned military operation to curb the emu population spiraled into a comical yet frustrating series of events. The soldiers, armed with machine guns, found themselves outwitted by the flightless birds. After several weeks of this avian-themed slapstick, the army, with their tails between their legs, retreated. The emus, with their surprising agility and numbers, had proven to be formidable opponents. The soldiers, despite their best efforts, couldn't keep up with the emus' erratic movements and sheer speed. The emus had won, or at least they declared a stalemate. The birds continued to roam the farmlands, much to the dismay of the farmers. The emus, seemingly aware of their victory, strutted around the fields, unbothered by the human attempts to control them. The war, however, had a lasting impact. It was a humbling experience for the military and a significant lesson for the farmers. The emus had shown that brute force wasn't always the answer. The farmers had to rethink their strategies and come up with a more sustainable solution. It showed the world that even the most well-equipped army is no match for the unpredictable forces of nature, especially when those forces come in the form of a big, grumpy bird with an attitude problem. The emus had become a symbol of resilience and the unpredictability of nature. In the end, the farmers resorted to a more practical, if less exciting, solution: fences. They began constructing extensive fencing around their farmlands to keep the emus out. It was a labor-intensive process, but it was the only way to protect their crops from the relentless birds. Lots and lots of fences. These fences stretched for miles across the Australian landscape, creating a barrier between the emus and the valuable crops. It was a sight to behold, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. It wasn't glamorous, but it did the trick, keeping the emus out of their crops and restoring some semblance of order to the outback. The farmers could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that their hard work had paid off. The Great Emu War might have ended in a draw, but the farmers had found a way to coexist with their feathered foes. Section 7, the war that lives on in legend and bumper stickers. The Great Emu War may not have been a military triumph, but it did give the world a good laugh. In 1932, the Australian government found itself in a peculiar predicament. The emu population had exploded, and these large, flightless birds were wreaking havoc on farmlands in Western Australia. Farmers, desperate to save their crops, turned to the government for help. What followed was an unusual military operation that has since become the stuff of legend. It's a story that's become a part of Australian folklore, a reminder that sometimes nature has a way of reminding us who's really in charge. The soldiers, armed with machine guns, found themselves outsmarted by the emus, who proved to be surprisingly agile and resilient. Despite their best efforts, the military operation was deemed a failure, and the emus continued to roam free, much to the amusement of the public. And if you ever find yourself driving through the Australian outback, don't be surprised to see a bumper sticker that reads, "Emu War Veteran. We fought, we lost, we surrendered to the birds." These humorous stickers serve as a light-hearted reminder of the time when humans tried and failed to outwit nature. The Great Emu War has since become a symbol of the unpredictable and often humbling relationship between humans and the natural world. And here's a fun fact for you. In the years that followed the Great Emu War, Australia experimented with various methods to control its bird population, including one particularly ingenious idea using scarecrows, loud noises, and even trained dogs to keep the emus at bay. However, none of these methods proved to be entirely effective, and the emus continued to thrive, recruiting kangaroos to box the birds into submission. While this idea may sound far-fetched, it highlights the lengths to which people were willing to go to protect their livelihoods. The image of kangaroos boxing emus has since become a humorous and iconic representation of Australia's unique wildlife and the creative, if not always successful, solutions that were attempted. Now that's what I call thinking outside the nest. The Great Emu War remains